Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. What a wonderful gathering. My name is Herb. I'm an alcoholic. I'll facilitate our gathering today. This call is being recorded. Please join me in the set aside prayer. God, please set aside everything that I think I know about myself, my brokenness, the 12 steps, and you, for an open mind and a new experience of myself, my brokenness, the 12 steps, and especially you. Please join me in the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So we've got a wonderful gathering of people here who are interested in helping people. That's really it. Keep it really simple. Every one of you is on this call because you've had a thought or a feeling that you want to be effective, certainly in your own personal lives, but maybe, and maybe it's a question for many of you, maybe to be helpful to other people, specifically with regard to their own spiritual journey, their own spiritual awakening through the methodology of the 12-step process. The single purpose of this call is to help people be effective in helping other people. You're welcome here if, in fact, that's not your intention, and that you're connected to the 12-step process in some fashion, and you're looking for an expansion of, or a deepening of, or some type of development in your own connection to the 12-step process. That's just fine. But the primary purpose of this, if I were in the corporate world, would be train the trainer. The people from my standpoint who are qualified to help people as a step guide, it's an informal term. You won't find it pretty much outside of my world. I believe I coined the phrase because it's my experience. My sponsor didn't have enough information or competency to take me through the steps out of the big book. So at 4 years of sobriety, I asked a man, not my sponsor, to help me with the steps. It was a 1-year project. And I had 4 such experiences like that over the next 20 years. A step guide, like a project manager. It had a beginning and it had an end. We did not become friends, and we did not become sponsor-sponsee relationship. And so this is about step guide. Now, the ideal, of course, is for a person to be a sponsor step guide / so that the sponsor is capable of taking the people they sponsor through the steps. Not always the invitation or the competency or the inclination. My sponsor was a wonderful sponsor without taking me through the steps, or quite frankly, discussing or knowledgeable about the big book, but he had uncommon common sense with regard to the program as well as the broader context of living life, and I used him as a sounding board for guidance. Over time, as I've done a multitude of sponsorship workshops, physical workshops in the day before COVID, I would get feedback from people as to what they found as the most significant ingredients in their sponsorship relationship. And I also have read at least 3 times the book 12-Step Sponsorship by Hamilton B. out of Hazleton. And the simplicity and the experience of this man who wrote the book is just wonderful. And so I've included some of the ingredients from that book in that list. And the most important one, I think, on the entire list is that the person be enjoying their life and their sobriety. If they're not enjoying their life and or not enjoying their sobriety, their abstinence, then there's probably something amiss, and you probably need to go to find somebody who is in fact awake and conscious and enjoying. I don't have any rules. I have lots of experience, lots of knowledge, and some suggestions, but I have no rules. I've adopted as a stance in my work of helping other people the culture of the 12-step fellowship. No rules, none. Bill Wilson was very clear. There's only 2 disciplines in Alcoholics Anonymous. We don't need rules and laws and regulations. And he said on a tape that I was listening to, there are only 2 rules, 2 disciplines, not rules, 2 disciplines in Alcoholics Anonymous. One is God and one is alcohol. You're either going for one or you're going for the other. I hope you can grasp that really in your imagination as well as in your heart, that image. It's like the dimmer switch. That's my favorite image versus a light switch. A light switch goes on and off. Most of us have a spiritual awakening like the dimmer switch that goes up a notch at a time. It's either going up toward the light or it's going down toward the darkness, and it's on a greased axle. And it's wired to go backwards. That's what Dr. Harry Tiebout said. In his own words, he said, Bill got it right. The first 9 steps are for the deflation of the ego at depth. The first 9 steps, the program of recovery, are for the deflation of the ego at depth. And Bill got it right. That's exactly what it does. Then he said, and the ego has an uncanny ability to regenerate itself. And that's why the big book suggests that we're not cured and we have a daily reprieve, because we're not dealing now with our addiction. We're dealing with unmanageability, the second half of the first step. Unmanageability, that self will run riot, and we're extreme examples. Daily reprieve. Daily reprieve. Based on the embracing of and practice of, not perfection of, the practice of steps 10, 11, and 12. The program of living, in contrast to the program of recovery. The first 9 steps, the program of recovery. Steps 10, 11, and 12, the program of living. So this may be for your personal development in terms of learning to navigate the 12 steps. And it may be for the personal development of helping other people navigate the 12 steps. That's the primary purpose of this journey here, this gathering of people, to talk about their experience, their questions, their concerns, their mistakes, please, so that we can all learn from what works and what doesn't work as you've tried it. And we can have conversations about that. And as I mentioned, crosstalk conversations. It could be a question like a sponsorship question. We've had a question recently. So I was asked to hear a 5th step. At what point do I say no? We hear in the 12-step fellowships, at least in AA, a lot. You never say no to an AA request. Well, it's just not true. It's just not true. I have said no. I will not travel 50 miles to do a 20-minute talk anymore. I used to, but I won't anymore. It wears me out. It's not a good use of my time. If in fact you are incompatible with somebody from a personality standpoint, for whatever reason, and we never have to explain, then perhaps it's best not to be involved with that person at whatever level, sponsorship or 5th step or a guide through or whatever. I do have a 3-hour workshop on sponsorship that I've done over this last year. It's current. And I use my PowerPoints in it. That's one of the real benefits of the pandemic, is the facility of Zoom that we've really adopted and adapted into our lives. And so I'm actually recording and re-recording all of the work I've done in the last 25 to 30 years that isn't video recorded, DVD video recorded. I'm converting from audio and or whatever else to the Zoom recording with my PowerPoint. So that is a resource that's on YouTube, I believe. And if you don't find it there, let me know, because I haven't done a research of the YouTube table of contents for a while. I do have a website that has a lot of material that's very downloadable, including the audio recording of a 12-step workshop that was done some years ago, edited, and it's really been a wonderful tool to assist people, because I unpack very deeply on a weekly basis. I unpack each of the steps and each component of each of the steps over a weekly journey for a year with a group of people. And many people have used that with great value. Those are my opening comments. I hope that was helpful to you. And now let's start talking.
I keep hearing about this positive inventory. People are saying, well, you're not supposed to just do a negative inventory. You're supposed to do a
positive. Not true.
What isn't?
There is no such thing as a positive inventory in the Big Book.
I've never seen it, but I wonder if you have a comment on that other than...
I just made it.
Okay, that's it. Put a big no beside
now with this exception, and I don't mean to give it short shrift, but I absolutely want to be black and white. The fourth step is about the impediments in me to the power that is in me. There's nothing positive about it. Now, the 10th step is a repetition of the fourth step. But the 11th step inventory in pages 85 to 88, it crosses over into the asset area, not just the liability, but the assets. So I'm, from a psychological sophistication standpoint, I'm very supportive of a, quote, positive inventory when you're doing this review at night. What did I do that I need to correct as a mistake? If you consider that negative, it's okay, I understand that. But what did I do today that was really, something that came out of God's grace and my interest in helping, and I can continue repeating that, an asset. So I think Bill is very clear. And if you read the 12 and 12, in both steps 10 and 11, in his commentary, he talks about assets and liabilities, but not step 4.
Okay.
No.
That's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
Do we ever, when we're doing, I'm helping somebody and myself, I am also doing a step 8. Do we ever, and preparing for step 9, do we ever guess at the harm? Like, it's all about harms done.
Yes.
Do we guess at the impact that we have had on them? Yes. Because, I know what my behavior is, but I can only guess what the effect of that behavior is. What do you think?
Yeah, and I think that is our prayerful responsibility, is to give an estimate to ourselves as to what the potential impact is. Now, some people know because they've been told by people how they hurt them or how they damaged them or whatever the harm. But in many cases, we really don't know. And so we ask if it's of substance, because a lot of people are, maybe 30 or 40% of the people on this call right now are perfectionistic, and they have this scrupulosity. If you've not heard that word before, look it up. It's a neurotic inclination to perfection. It's not healthy at all, scrupulosity. And And so it needs to be substantive, and you're making a wonderful distinction between behavior and the harm done. Many people, when I'm in a conversation about harms, are so focused on what they did, they're not really talking about the harms done. And the harms, as I define it, are the negative impact of my behavior. Quite different. Step 8 is about the negative impact of my behavior. Step 9 is to talk about with that person how I can correct the damage that was done to them by my behavior. So I don't want to overtalk this, but I do want to address, did I address the issue for you?
Yes, I'm also wondering though, that brings up another question. If they are not, are they supposed to, the person that I'm making my amend to, say, yeah, you really, I had a loss of self-esteem. Get into exactly what harms were caused. Sometimes people aren't very able to do that.
That's correct.
Do we help them, or is that totally up to them?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
it's up to them to describe or not what the harm is, and we be patient and tolerant, but no, I don't think we help them build the building. So I have a process I describe in step 9 is I tell them what I did and the harm as I think it. Then I ask them, is there anything else that I did that I didn't talk about? And or is there any comment that you would like to make about that?
Yeah.
Then I make a suggestion, third item in the 4th step. In the 9th step process, the third component of a 4-component process. First, I tell them what I did and I estimate the harm done. Then I ask them if there any comment they want to make on that, or is there any expansion that they want to make on that. Third, I suggest the amend that is appropriate, whatever that is, and that's all been pre-discussed with my sponsor and or step guide. And then the 4th item is there anything else that I need to do that you would think about that can improve the quality of your life that's connected to the damage that I did?
Okay.
And
So
that kind of gives everybody gives them a prompter. Now, most people are very uncomfortable with this process that are receiving it.
Mm.
And so they want it over with, and they're not very interested in a conversation. The difference might be in fathers and mothers, and brothers and sisters, and children. They might have some interest and some comfort level in having a discussion.
So when you say an estimate of the harm done, you're not really getting into psychology here. You're just saying this probably diminished you in some way.
Yes, and that's where the preparation is really important, that you're not also taking responsibility for how they feel.
Right, right.
Because they're responsible for their reaction. They're responsible for their feelings. Now, I don't try to educate them in that. At that time, it might be too tender a time to be telling them that they need to grow up, but yeah.
Well, I have another question. I am not sure if I made my amends to my son. I truly cannot bring it to mind. Out of my 3 children, he's the one that's still quite distant and disconnected. I feel like maybe I should do it again. I
Well,
don't.
yeah, and yes, but how about very informal? Do you have a relationship where you have a cup of coffee, or you have a lunch or a dinner, or you take a walk or something like that?
No, he lives in another part of of Canada. Yeah.
Do you ever visit him?
Yeah, once in a while. Yep.
Oh, okay. Well, be prepared. Maybe it's a telephone conversation, some informal time in an informal way. And I'm saying really light touch it, because you don't know. All right. I mean, and I'm acknowledging that that's legitimate. All right. You don't have to just say, I love you so much, and we've had some strain in our relationships. You keep it kind of general, but you're inviting, you're opening it up. Is there anything that we need to talk about that would be important to you for me to know about our relationship, or any negative impact I've had on your life?
Mm.
See what I mean? It's very informal. It's kind of a light touch. You just spring it on him, kind of but you make sure that he's in a relaxed mood, and he's not. He can hear it. He's not just going to brush it off unless he wants to brush it off. But it's not about the time pressure that forces him to brush it off.
Yeah, that would feel pretty good doing that. Awkward, but good. Because if I have done it and I'm doing it again, I guess there's really no harm caused.
Well, if you're doing it as a formal amend, and you start talking the talk of formal amend, and you've already done it before, then you're a pest.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what I'm suggesting is an informal kind of like, soft, kind of a mushy, kind of a open, like, hey, is there anything? I mean, if I died today, is there anything that's not been said?
Right. That's a good one. I like that. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, thank you very much, Herb. That's really been helpful.
Well, this may or may not be relevant, but it came to my mind as we were talking on a Sunday 3 years ago. My wife and I just had this fabulous conversation about bucket lists and things we wanted to do, and the planning for the next year, and kids. And then that afternoon we had dinner with our 2 children. And before we went to bed last night, I said, is there anything that we need to clean up? Is there anything on your bucket list that you would like to do? And she said, no. It was like, no, it's like, we're just so in such good shape. She died that night.
Ah,
Yeah, I know. She wasn't expecting it, and neither was I. And now I can talk about it without crying. But you talk about bringing things to closure. Yeah. So you want to know that. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thanks, Herb.
Yeah.
I'm doing the steps through a step study group,
Oh, good.
and with some facility with you, and also with my therapist, who
All
I've
right.
asked
Wonderful.
actually did
Yeah.
my step 5 with personally.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
It's been
Yeah.
kind of a combined effort, let's say.
Well, it is. It's a community function. Absolutely. So wonderful. You're welcome here. And after you finish your 5th step, my sponsor said, you now know enough about yourself and about the program that you can help somebody else as a sponsor and as a step guide. Just don't try to help anybody with work that you haven't done. If you haven't done your 9th step, don't try to help anybody. Do your 9th step before you help somebody else. But if you've done your 4th step, then you can help somebody else do a 4th step.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then just one other question I had, because you touched on it when you said, am I working with a sponsor? I feel I have a sponsor from the beginning. We have a good relationship, kind of like you said, with yours, but I don't feel like he either wanted to or had the motivation to take me through the book, line by line and step by step. So I've been kind of accumulating this on my own, and I'm wondering, do I really need one person who's quote unquote the sponsor that I talk to every day and tell everything to and have that kind of relationship?
Well, first, that would be a conversation with your current sponsor.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great. And so you'll get some direction there. I do believe that's what sponsorship is about, is accountability and that kind of conversation. But part of the question that you didn't ask is, do I need a personal guide as I'm doing the steps in a step group? And the answer would probably be yes, that you do need somebody who is helping you personally navigate and unpack step 4. Yeah, I don't believe it would be sufficient for you to participate in a group at a group level and not have individual guidance with you, each component of your step 4. I think you would benefit from it. There's no rules, but I think you will benefit from it if you have somebody personally confirming and clarifying your work as you go along in step 4. All right.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. That's exactly what we're here for, is that very, very conversation. Thank you so much.
In our group, most of the new members are between 21 and 27 years old. They are quite young people. And they usually come from a rehab center.
Oh, yes.
And so my question is, how would you present the process, your process? Because I think there is a difference between somebody who has 2 years of recovery or 4 years, and then a new one who is with urges and he's confused and he doesn't know, but he thinks he wants to do the steps. And how do you push at least to read the book? And the AA book that I think is, I mean,
well, first
so
of all,
I don't know if you have any question about that, the age.
No, but this is this is what we're doing here. Exactly that question. Dr. Alan Berger is a clinical psychologist that I co-facilitate workshops with. And from him, I've learned a lot about professional approach to helping people. And one of his phrases is, meet them where they are. Not where they think they are, not where you want them to be, but really where they are. What can they do? What will they do? Now, to answer specifically a question that you raised specifically, and that is, yes, they can read the big book. Yes, they can read the big book. I don't care what level of sobriety you have, how new or not you are, or experienced or not. You can read the big book. Can you read it effectively? That depends on a lot of things. But yes, that's an assignment I give everybody. I don't care whether they're still drinking. Read that book. And yes, and let's talk about it. But here's watch my hands now. All right. If they're really just brand new and detoxing, I give them this much. If they're 5 or 10 or 20 years in the program, I can give them this much.
Okay.
If they're particularly experienced and they've done the steps before and they're kind of awake, I can give them this much.
Okay.
Yeah. But feed them pablum until they can eat raw meat.
What happened is that you are, well, at least in my case, I am like kind of, I don't want them to go and drink again. So, I mean, I cannot avoid that. I just pray before I go into a meeting with him or the set aside prayer. I teach them the set aside prayer, but then the results, and that's the only thing. But I was asking if I can do something to speed up the process so they can.
No. And you can't want it more than they want it for themselves. So your job is to help them get the questions.
Okay.
To help them get a connection to their experience so that they get a sense of desperation, so that they're coming to you and say, Juan, I need to meet with you again soon because I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, and I want to be fed.
That's where I was getting. How do you motivate them?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
With questions and with a little bit of sharing of your experience. They're suffering and you're not. Tell them about how you came from suffering to not suffering.
Okay. Perfect.
And keep it simple. Keep it simple. Meet them where they are, what they can do, what they will do.
Not what I want them to do. Okay.
No,
Thank you.
No, that would be very frustrating.
Thank you.
You bet.
Hi, this is a follow-on question to the first one, and we're in step 9 here. The last number 4, which you called out, says, ask, are there any other meds? And you told a story over the years about a man who went to his ex-wife, and the wife said,
yeah, give me $26,000. And the man said, I don't think so. So this morning, my buddies asked me, what does this mean when we go to ask if there are other amends and there's some demand or request that we need to say no to?
Well, do we need to say no is the question.
Well, that we have to consider.
That's it.
And that would be either very difficult or not, we're not able to do. How does that square with the fact that here we are trying to make amends for the harm that they've already identified? Let's say they're able to. That's my question.
Well, and of course we would have to deal with specifics because generalities are not going to be very helpful. And so you mentioned the specific situation where this man was asked for a check for a lot of money after 20 years of divorce. And in his deliberation in prayer, and then in conversation with me, he determined he didn't owe any money, that she was just blackmailing him. All right. So then he could say, no, I'm not going to respond to that. But then you use the right term, I believe. The healthy term is, I need to consider their requests. And that's what I would say to them. If in the heat of the amend process, I would say, wow, I'm really hearing you. And then you might even repeat it. This is what you said. And let me consider that and I'll get back to you. And then you pray about it. And then you talk to a sponsor. And then it's about common sense. You said, oh, that might be hard to do. Oh, yeah. So it's hard to do. It might be appropriate. So it's about common sense here, and it's about reasonable. And those are a couple things that in early recovery, I can't come to a legitimate conclusion about because I'm not objective and I don't have common sense. And I'm still wrapped around the axle of my self-centeredness. But I want to be a better person, so I pray about it. I talk to my sponsor about it. And if my sponsor and or step guide doesn't have that experience, I go to somebody with experience in that particular area, and then I can come up with, and Bill says it in the financial area, arrange the best deal that you can make. So I do believe you have a responsibility to consider the request. I don't believe you have a responsibility to respond identically with what they're requesting because it may not be reasonable. It may be disproportionate. Does that make all? So I gave you a general answer to a general situation.
Yeah, I understand that. For me, it sounds like it's connected to how attached I am to their acceptance of my amendment.
Oh, thank you. Wonderful. Will you say it again, please? Because that's a wonderful, clear statement.
For me, it's about how attached I am to their acceptance of my amends, and whether I can disconnect my amends from their reaction. Because if I say, no, I can't meet that, after going to my sponsor and talking to whatever and saying, I can't do that in good conscience because it would not serve me. Sounds a little self-centered, but
well, you might use different words, but
no, I would never say that to them. But I'm saying to myself, if I come to that and I say, I can't do that,
yes,
it doesn't support my recovery.
Yes.
Then I go back, and my concern, here's the attachment, is that they will throw the entire amends out and say, well, you didn't really mean it. If you're not going to do this.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So and that's why I wanted you to repeat it. It's such an important point. We're making an amends, and whether or not they accept it is none of your business. Now, here's the term forgiveness comes in. And I looked it up at the direction of the people I was working with. because forgiveness is a process that begins with the 4th step and ends with the 9th step. And I looked it up. And forgiveness, watch my hand, forgiveness in the dictionary says a decision to release them. A decision to release them. That's the detachment that you talked about. All right. What they do with it is their business, not mine. I would consider, their reaction and stuff to see, well, maybe there was something that I either did or didn't do that created that reaction, and I could have done something or not done something that would have provided a better or healthier reaction. All right. There might be some responsibility on my part, but I'm not responsible for their reactions, and I'm not responsible for their feelings, and I'm not responsible to meet their needs. Yeah. And so if in fact you stumble on any of what I've just said, it might be worthy of 10 visits to an Al-Anon meeting.
Yes. That's where I learned all this. Yeah.
No, but that's a really, thank you so much for that insight of attachment and detachment to their reaction.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks very much.
It resonated for me how I'm really at the bottom of so much. I'm always looking for the outside, for them, for you, to make me feel okay.
Yeah.
And I've heard it before. I deal with it with my therapist all the time for decades, but it hit at another level. And I cannot thank you enough. It hit, it's so fundamental. It's just so fundamental.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Well, and you're welcome. I was writing some reflections over the weekend, and a phrase came to me. I am not personally responsible for anything outside of me. I am responsible personally for everything inside of me. And it was a wonderful way of sort of black and whiting it so that I can kind of get it. And isn't that what the Serenity Prayer is? What can I change? What can I influence, and what can't I? I can't influence much outside of me. I can influence some things inside of me, but I need wisdom in order to discern that. You're right on the money. That's emotional sobriety, emotional maturity. Yeah.
And when you actually said that on Saturday about that, I need the Serenity Prayer and I need the wisdom.
Yeah.
And the next level of that was that, because we hear so much, and I've been one of them, I get triggered by people. You talked about that last week, or yesterday, Saturday, maybe triggered. Wait, whose feelings are they? They're your feelings. So if they're, but and the expectations I have of people to act a certain way in order for me to be okay. Yeah. And I don't know how I can even step out in the world right now, because it's so huge to have this at a deeper level.
Yeah.
And so that leads me to a question. So I've been abstinent in Overeaters Anonymous. My abstinence in OA is no sugar.
Yeah.
For today is my 33rd birthday, actually, by chance. Yeah. And trying my best, to do this. And I'm also in HOW, which is for people, it's another food program. And I don't know many people who are in both, but I can do that. I know for me, I feel comfortable, because what HOW gives me is for this body and mind, I need a more structured food plan.
Right.
Because of an obsession of the mind and allergy of the body. But over the years, I really try to resign from the debating society about all of the above. And yet HOW, I just have to say this, HOW has a lot of rules.
Yeah.
And it has also helped me. So I do struggle with that sometimes, because I hear you say no rules. And I want to share this with you, that I was speaking to someone in HOW the other day who has tremendous recovery. She's an Al-Anon too, 25 years. And I said, I heard at the Step Guide workshop, the first one, that we're here to help, that really is the bottom line. And in how I've heard over the years, if it's hurting your program, you should let that sponsee go. And you addressed that before. Like, what does that mean, hurting your program? At least I interpreted it this way, hurting the program. And the person I was talking to said, that's right. That's what I do. I said, well, actually, I just want to pose this to you. That what does that mean, hurting your program? All we do, we share our experience, strength, and hope. And it's up this hurting your program thing. And I was really happy to share that with her.
But see, what you learned was how to ask the question. You didn't have to reprimand her. You didn't have to create it relationship. You didn't have to discipline her. No, you asked her to reflect on a question. How wonderful.
So, yes. And I have to say one more thing, that a miracle happened yesterday. I think it's a miracle. I've had a terrible rift with one of my brothers and his wife. It's basically directed by his wife, who may be unstable, whatever. There's been a lot of emails over the years, toxic, accusatory, shaming, and I've worked very hard, and without going into all of that. And I'm not perfect, and I know it. But yesterday, and she disallowed me from seeing their daughter. It's been crazy at times. But yesterday, out of the blue, the 16-year-old daughter, my niece, called me out of the blue and said, I was just surfing and I really miss you. And I have my new car and I'm wondering if I can stop by. Anyways, I find over the years, when I keep my eye on the ball, and it's really hard sometimes, and I try to take the higher road, that then these unexpected things happen sometimes that I could never imagine.
That's right. That's right. Be prepared to be surprised is one of my mantras. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not in a food program, but I've got lots of exposure to them. And my thoughts about how are that they are the Green Berets of the food recovery.
And I don't agree with everything. And there's a lot of layers that happen in how people don't talk.
It works for you. And that's the bottom line. Does it work for me? Does it help me? Does it help them? Please, that's the only criteria. It's not about being correct. It's about being helpful. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I have two questions. I'm going through your workshop right now, the one that meets on Wednesday in the United States. And I really would like to give back by becoming a step guide next year or in July. And I was wondering, because I also have still issues with perfectionism. Do you think, having only had one of your classes, I am qualified to help somebody? I really want to help, but I remember the thing that they say for doctors, cause no harm. And so I want an evaluation.
That's nice. That's nice. That's very nice. I like that. I haven't adopted that before. I've heard it before in terms of doctors, but I've not adopted it in terms of ours. But I like it. I think I will. Cause no harm. But be very careful with that, because it's really about your pointing the way to God, isn't it?
Yes.
It's not about them worshiping the finger. It's about them looking in the direction of the finger and following direction. So the only question is, have you completed steps 4 and 5?
Yes, I have.
So you're totally qualified to help somebody get through step 5. Have you completed step 9?
Could you remind me what step 9 was?
Oh, the amends process. So if you don't know what it is, you probably haven't completed it. Yeah.
I was going to wait until Thursday to talk to you about it. I've seemed to have hit a stone wall. I've had a lot of resentments and anger against people. Like I had a boss.
But that's not relevant. Wait.
Okay.
I'm going to stop you. I don't want the story, as you know. Step 9 is not about resentments.
Well.
No, step 9 is not about resentments. It's about harm. All right. So have you made a list of harms?
I have.
And have you begun to meet with the people, at least on the telephone or by sending letters, to correct those harms?
At the present time, I'm talking to my sponsor and my step guide because they're
Perfect.
not in agreement. It's because I think I've done harm, but in their eyes, I haven't.
Ah, well, they're probably correct, and you're probably overly sensitive.
Yeah, that's, and it's like the ones that I figured I did do harm to is my mother, my daughter, my husband, my son. But this is my fifth.
Those are important relationships. All right. Now, you were going to say something about this is my fifth one?
My fifth AWOL. So I've tried to make amends.
This is an AWOL.
I know, but I've tried to make amends to them at least twice. And I never did it the way.
An AWOL probably doesn't prepare you to do a proper.
I did not make a proper one.
Right.
So what I've tried to do since that time is continue with living amends, because all of them told me things like, I had a perfect childhood, or you're the perfect wife. It ain't true.
Let it go. You're trying to bring yourself to a sense of completion at their expense.
Okay. So that's what I was going to talk to you about.
No, don't be a pest. Yeah, unless your sponsor and or step guide agree that you need to revisit it, which I don't think they're going to, then move on to ones that you can and or have a reason to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but no. So to answer the question that you opened with is, you're quite competent to help somebody with what you know and what you've done. Don't try to be Herb, try to be Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Yeah?
Thank you. Those were my two questions.
Yeah, no, there's a wonderful question, and for everybody, be who you are. Don't get over your skis. Don't try to be your sponsor. Don't try to be your step guide. Don't try to be me. Try to be yourself and share what does the book say? It doesn't say share your knowledge. It says share your experience.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's why I asked about your experience. You have experience, you can share that, but don't try to share. A wonderful phrase in sponsorship or step guide is, I don't know. I don't have experience with that. You'll have to find somebody who knows and or who has experience with that. Wonderful. That's called humility. Yeah. See, that's exactly what this is about. All of the questions that you guys are asking, everybody on this call is learning from the dialogue that we have about that, I believe. Yeah, thank you.
What I wanted to, I'm currently, I sponsor 4 people, but I'm going through the steps with 2 in particular. And I wanted to go back to the very first question about, is it possible to have a positive 4th step? I agree with you that the book absolutely is not about, it's about defects. It's not about any assets, but I particularly find in my experience, I've been sober 42 years, that with women, as perhaps compared to men, with women, it's important to move from emphasis on the defects to finding even if they're potential assets, but moving toward that. And I find for me, a great way to do that work is to jump into the 6th and 7th step, which I really believe is where I live every day. Yeah. And literally take whatever name we've agreed to for the defect, pull out the dictionaries and start looking up the antonym of every one of those labels.
Yes.
And then take that potential asset and begin to translate it into behavior. But, when I'm working with a woman who's had a childhood of neglect and abuse, I do not want to stay in those defects all the time.
Well, as you know, I mean, I think if you've had some exposure to me, my way of life document has in the fear inventory and in the 6 and 7 step inventory, those kinds of turnarounds that you experience in the resentment inventory, which is, okay, I can look at all of the nasty. I can look at it all the nasty, and I need to, but what would I look like if I didn't have the nasty?
Right.
You know, who would I be? What are the strengths? And we call them virtues. It comes from the Latin virtus,
Right.
which means strength. What are the strengths that I might have or I might want to have? And I'll create a vision of that. And I'll begin attempting to behave that way and not focus. Because there's a saying again, Dr. Alan Berger from psychology, what we focus on grows.
Right.
If we're focused on the negative, hello, darkness. If we're focused on the light, it's going to get bright.
Right.
Yeah.
I do have a question also, and that is, and I don't, you probably haven't discussed it, but the 4th step talks about a fearless and moral inventory.
Yes.
Well, what I'm particularly looking for is some commentary on the word moral. What does that mean in the 4th step?
Yeah, I actually have done a reflection on that. It'll be coming out as part of a weekly release of reflections that'll begin sometime probably in June. And when you look it up in the dictionary, and if you look at the Latin derivative, it comes from a value. Moral means value, not immoral. It's not an antonym for immoral.
Okay.
It's a word. Mores mores in Latin means the laws. What are the values? So part of the words that I use in helping people dive into the 4th step, especially the resentment inventory, is what are your beliefs? What are your motives? And then when we get through with the sex inventory, what are your principles?
Okay.
What are the principles? And when you look up the word principle, it's the source from which behavior comes. That guides us. And so recently in my meditation about principles, and it might be connected to age too, but it's handrails. I have this image of handrails or guardrails. These are the guides for me. Principles are the guides for me for my behavior, so I don't slip off the ledge.
Thank you very much.
First question on the amends. If someone is making an amends and they're not getting to the heart of what the amend is about. You know, it's like they're making amends because I yelled at you, when in fact they were yelling because they were being defensive about the deeper thing that was going on. That's not for me to point out, is it?
Oh, very much so. That is, in fact, the job of the step guide and sponsor. The question this man, the first man who took me through the steps, the question that he asked me all the time, which was so irritating and yet so therapeutic, was, Herb, what's the harm? Well, didn't you hear me? I did this, I did that, I did that. He said, Herb, what's the harm? Oh my God, I did this, I did that, I did that. Herb, what's the harm? And I go, what aren't you hearing? He says, all I'm hearing is your behavior. I'm not hearing the impact on the other person. What's the harm? And it was so like, oh, it's still, I'm making it about me, and it's not. It's not one bit about my behavior. It's about how did they receive it? So I use the word, how did I diminish the quality of their life? And if I don't know, as we talked about earlier, and it's substantive enough to be worthy of spending their time talking about it, I ask them, literally, how did my behavior or my being in your life diminish the quality of your life? Would you like to talk about that? Over half of the people have no interest in that kind of exploration, but some of them do. Yeah.
Okay, that's perfect. Thank you. One other quick one, because I was just on the phone with a sponsee before we got on, and I'm not sure I gave the right direction. So my sponsee has a woman who keeps relapsing, and she wants to come back, and so my sponsee, instead of like jumping back into the steps, is having her do work like 90 and 90 and read this and do that, and kind of to make sure she's serious this time.
Mhm.
Is that the right approach, or should she just get her right back into the steps?
Yeah, and it's really there's no right or wrong answer there,
right.
it's probably a combination. One of Clancy used to say, action is the magic word. Action's the magic word. And the turnaround that we eventually have is from self-centeredness to other-centeredness, and that's the spiritual awakening. But how do you get there? Maybe incrementally by actually going early to a meeting and helping out, and staying late at a meeting and helping out, if in fact you have physical meetings anymore, and or in some way thinking about helping somebody else. And it brings to mind a story. I had a man come to me who was a crack cocaine addict, and it was just ruining his life, and he was desperate, and he really wanted to change it. And I said, you're so messed up, you can't even pray because you're so, messed up in your head, but try to read this card every day. And you're so messed up, nobody wants what you have, and you can't be any helpful in a meeting at all. I mean, you're just a total mess. So don't talk to anybody. And I said, but find some way in prayer, find some way that you can help somebody. A week later, he came, he says, I was in my neighborhood, and there was a little men's club there of elderly men. And they said that I play checkers, and they said I could come over and play checkers with the guys. He's 10 years sober today.
Wow.
Yeah, because he found something that he could do that'd be useful, that wasn't about him.
Yeah. Okay, because I took the action approach myself.
Yep.
So, okay.
Yep.
I have the experience in sponsoring many people where they've done the 12 steps, they're continuing to do the work, and certain behaviors continue to crop up. A favorite one of a lot of people is they're really down on themselves, or they call reverse pride or false pride, or they end up being more grandiose and exert themselves. But underneath is a lot of self-loathing. I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable. It shows up on their fear inventory. So as a sponsor, when these behaviors continue to recur, to me, it's an invitation to go deeper into the work. So I'd like to hear from you some of the things that you do in the steps to help them continue to awaken. For example, I often will take them back to 4 if this resentment continues to recur. But then I take them to 6 and say, are you really ready to let go of this? Is this something that you're attached to? And if so, what is it doing for you? What do you get from this before I even launch into 6? And then I take them to 7. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts about how you deal with these repetitive behaviors as a step guide.
2 things that came out of what you were talking about, and I'm sure this is a treasure trove of conversation. But the one is, you talked about resentments that are recurring. The most effective tool in the big book are pages 66 and 67 that talk about deep resentments. And he says there, when you really unpack it on page 66, that essentially, I'm going to paraphrase it, we're as powerless over our deep resentments as we are over our addiction. Powerless over our deep resentments. So he spends a page and a half giving us suggestions that distill down to pray, not for them, to pray for yourself. It says, ask God to help us. All right. So we're asking in his instruction, we're asking the divine surgeon to enter into our souls, my words, to surgically remove the resentment that I have for this person. And if you go to the Way of Life document, I have a prayer that I've culled out of those words in the big book and some other areas, and wordsmithed it into a prayer for the removal of deep resentment from me. And my experience is I prayed each day for the removal specifically of a specific resentment. And after 3 months of prayer, also finishing the 9th step in that area, that it was removed and it never came back. All right, that's one. The other thought that I had that was life-changing for me, and you mentioned 6 and 7, was my approach at 7 years of sobriety, doing the work again, to steps 6 and 7 for the very first time. The man suggested that I pray specifically for the removal of a specific character defect. That language is not even implied in the big book or the 12 and 12, but that was his experience and his suggestion, to pray specifically for the removal of a specific character defect. And here's the real punchline: and call me regularly to hold yourself accountable for the behavior that comes out of that defect. Well, he made a wonderful distinction. Did you? And you seem to maybe even hear it as I said it, and that is the character defect I'm powerless over. Therefore, I pray because I'm powerless. However, the behavior that comes out of it, I'm 100% responsible for, and therefore I hold myself accountable. I pray in the morning because I'm powerless. Sometime before I go to bed, I talk about it to this man who was holding me accountable as to how I'm behaving. And within 48 hours, the behavior went away and never returned. I kept praying and accountable for 2 more years, and the inclination went away after 2 years. 2 years. I'm not saying there's magic here in the sense of fairy dust and immediate. I am saying there's magic here in terms of the long-term impact. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense, because I went through it with my driving. My driving was not what it was supposed to be, and I was hearing about it. And it took me a year to slow down, a year of prayer and meditation, because I realized it was an impulse.
Yeah.
And impulses are something that only God can help me remove, but it was so deeply ingrained in the lining of my mind that I realized it took me a year to even be able to hear, this is not good. And I don't want to be a person that endangers anyone's safety. So I totally get what you're saying.
Well, in fact, Bill in the 12 and 12 in step 4 uses the word instincts gone awry. They're cellular structured survival instincts in us. All right. And those things don't get managed very readily. That's right. So it takes a while, because we need to create new habits. Yeah. Thank you
Thank you so much.
I'm happy to be here. This is an awesome discussion, and exactly why I came to this group, for sure. What's been cool is seeing that, like, a lot of the fears that I had or have about being a step guide or a sponsor are kind of echoed, at least that I've heard. And so as I was going back and forth between deciding, I have a million questions, but we don't have time for that, right? So I'm going back and forth between deciding if I want to keep asking how hard to push on sponsees until I get the answer that I want, or sort of to go back to what I know, which is to share an experience of my own, if I could, related to sponsorship. So I had heard someone in this group last week referenced maybe within the first, I think they said 6 months or 6 something, find a sponsor, that it doesn't have to be done immediately, which I was happy to kind of hear. Because in my experience, I was told, get a sponsor, you're going to drink, get a sponsor, you're going to drink, get a sponsor, you're going to drink. So I'm just looking for the first person. Okay, I have a sponsor, check, done. Right. And it was not a good experience.
Correct.
For me. I ended up being paired with someone who ended up, they would say things that did harm me at the stage that I was at. They would say, and I came later, they would say that, your boyfriend is your higher power. Shopping is your higher power. I might have a lot of things wrong with me, but I didn't really resonate with either of those two things, right? It seemed, but what I ended up doing was eventually stepping away from that sponsor, and it was long and hard, and I had lots of resentments about it and what it meant. But I went for a sponsor who had what I wanted. And I guess what I highlight is to say, what I found that this sponsor had given me that I was missing before was she always reiterated that we, how excited she was for me to get the gifts, how much she was enthusiastic, and how much she has gotten from this program in her life.
She was a cheerleader.
She's a cheerleader.
Yeah.
But she also very much lived those principles. And I guess that's what
was the model.
There you go. And so now I'm fast forward a little bit and leaving out all the details because it's not about the story, right? But the sponsor that I had at first, I had watched her over time. I knew that I had made the right decision stepping away because I watched her get sponsees and they would walk away. Sponsees, they would walk away. She would get a new sponsor, they would walk away. A new sponsor, they would walk away. My sponsor ended up going to her, asking if she, I don't know how exactly it worked out. I wasn't present for this conversation, but ended up sponsoring her. And I think she's been sober for 13, 14 years, where everyone else was pulling this woman aside and saying to her, hey, there's no 13 stepping in the rooms. Hey, you can't come if you're just coming with a new man. Hey, you need to do this, this, and this if you want me to sponsor you. Hey, this or that. My sponsor, again, modeled that loving, hey, it doesn't say anywhere in the big book that you can't date someone here, or that loving kindness that we all, and now she's my sponsee sister. And when I had talked to my new sponsor about stepping away from the original sponsor, she said to me, think of what she did for you in your recovery. She has a gift with newcomers. I don't have, my sponsor said, I don't have the freedom to get to a meeting with you every single day, but she had the ability. How many times did you drop what you were doing and go to a meeting, and there she was? Any day that I called her was the answer. But it's beautiful to see, I guess, a sponsor who lets people start where they're at and brings together. I don't know if I'm articulating it in the way
you are. Have confidence.
Okay. Yeah. It was a very meaningful thing to me. And where that resentment was that I held, like, damn, I'm never getting a sponsor again. I'm going to only get a temporary sponsor so people get off my back. I'm going to get with, this lady because she seems like she's easygoing. She's chill. I want what she has. She's funny. She's always rigging on her husband, and she's funnier than he is, which is, all the right things. And then lo and behold, what I didn't know, I come to find out that she's a Herb K thumper. So the joke was on me. I had my work cut out for me. But yeah, that's kind of what it is, that living. And here I am today. And today she's the only one who can piss me off. And whenever I'm upset, she asks what's going on. I'm like, I'm pissed off because whatever you're saying, I'm going to realize, probably tomorrow or the next day that you're right. Right now, you're just annoying.
Yeah, no, annoying is just a wake-up call.
Yep.
Yep, that's wonderful.
My question is, with us ending one session, I've been a step guide for 3 years. I definitely want to do it again in July. Part of the group that I've had this year, we were together last year and they didn't need to do the step work. And my sense is I want to have a new group that I can really help possibly learn about the steps, but I've got fellowship with these people that I've been with for a couple years, and just wondering if you have any thoughts on how to either proceed. I really want to try to help new people, but yet I just don't want to drop the fellowship, the group that we've kind of been together, and in a quandary of
I guess I really don't then understand the question. You have, it sounds to me like you have a a challenge maybe about time or something, but what really is your question? Why can't you do both?
Well, that's my answer. Yes, it's somewhat a question of time and where my priorities should be. But if I have
Those are
time,
the right questions.
pardon?
Those are the right questions.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it. And I just want to put a word for those who have not been step guides. I didn't think I was qualified after just being a participant for the first year. And it's just been an incredible experience. Words come to me that I do know where they're coming from. But if you've been through the process with the step guide for the year and gone through the steps, it's an incredible gift to be able to pass on. So I highly recommend it. Thanks.
Yeah. And from the teaching profession community, I've learned if you want to really learn something, try to teach it. And that captures my experience in terms of what we do. I've been doing workshops now for 25 years. And after the first couple of the workshops, my wife went to the workshop. She wasn't in the workshop, but she came in the very last meeting of the workshop, which was a celebration. And she said to the workshop, "Thank you for what you've done for Herb."
Well, and also I just had a thought that just being a step guide and not doing all the work, each year that I've been a step guide, I have had incredible growth. This year, it's been life-changing for me. So even if you do it osmosisly, you continue to change.
That's right.
Trying to help others.
That's right. That's right.
So thank you.
My question is in regards to the first step in working with others, especially when coming up on the idea of the mind.
Yes.
And the mental obsession. And I guess it's always been kind of my feeling that it's best to ask questions and hopefully have that person come to the realization of that no choice aspect themselves. But sometimes, like if I'm in that situation and I'm working with somebody and I'm not feeling like that they see it, I end up just kind of giving away the show.
That's okay. Yeah, because a part of it, they need to know the vocabulary. They need to know what your experience is. And at least from an understanding standpoint, they'll get it. But then if you help them ask some more questions, it'll go from here to here. You've heard me say, this man said to me, "You have a lot of information, Herb, but you have no transformation." And that was what he was talking about. But he helped me ask the questions and he gave me some vocabulary so that I could understand what he was talking about. And eventually with the right questions, it went to here.
Okay. So basically it's not a matter of, because even if you say it and they understand it on an intellectual level, it's not like they've necessarily connected it to their experience yet. So it could be
you'll know when they connect it to their experience, because they're going to look at you and go, "Oh shit."
Right. But then I feel like also that isn't that like part of like the where a lot of the desperation would come from to push forward through the rest of the process.
Yeah, I don't like the word push. All right, and it's been used a couple of times. I try not to put so much pressure on them. It's not about your pushing, it's about inviting. I love the carrot better than the stick, although they're both important, and it's not a science, it's an art form, and we kind of learn from the practice.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks.
One of the things that really stood out that you have clarified is harms, and making the distinction of behavior and actually what harms did what really harms did I do? How did I diminish the quality of your life? That was rather illuminating for me. Do you enumerate in the way of life document harms? Is it your way of life document?
No, I illustrate the process, that 4-part process in the step 9, but it's really up to you. The big book has pages 76 to 83 has a commentary and some examples about different kinds of harms, but there's no way that anybody could, well, I guess you could write it out, but it's really up to you. and the process I suggest for people in the 8th step is to list the person that you think you harmed, to list the behavior specifically that you did that was the harm, list specifically the harm that you think happened. And if you get that specific with each of them, the person themselves comes up with, and that's why I love the word diminish. Harm is like one of those words like God. It just stops me cold. I can't go further. So I had to find my way around harm. I had to find a new word. And diminish was, for me, diminish was the word in terms of the quality of their life. And then, of course, the 12 and 12 has a wonderful commentary on that. And they talk about financial, they talk about physical, they talk about mental, they talk about spiritual, and of course, emotional. Those are the 5 categories I have in the 4th step, 4th column, when we have those 2 questions about harm, questions number 6 and 7 in that worksheet.
Thank you.
Well, no, it's a great question. Because it gets really specific, and thank you so much.
I was raised that you just say yes to any reasonable program request. But because of COVID, people aren't going to as many in-person meetings, obviously. And so I've ended up saying yes to an awful lot of sponsees. A good majority falls off, but right now it feels a little overwhelming. My sponsors all say, it's God's job. Got to work it out. God will give you time. Answer the phone when you can. Teach them just like we taught you. Make sure they have backup people to call, etc. But just logistically, how do you organize, manage your sponsees? Like, do you keep track of what step sponsees are on, or when they call?
That's their job. No, that's their job. In fact, at first I was embarrassed that I wasn't more, I didn't have a better memory of our conversations or my assignments. And then I got over it. I said, it's not my job. It's your job. Where are you in the step work? What was your last assignment? Where are we now? What is it that you want to talk about? I have no embarrassment about that now. And oh, by the way, what's your name? No, I don't go that far. I don't go that far. But I asked the man that. I said, when do you say no? And he goes, well, I've never had that experience. If God sends them, I accept them, and I deal with them one at a time. And if I have space on my calendar, they own me.
But that you really leave it up to them to pursue. You don't say, let's talk every Tuesday at this time. Or
no.
You're very unstructured. You allow them the dignity of making it their recovery.
When we're doing the step work, great question. When we're doing the step work, I suggest they call me once a week. Half of them do, half of them don't. If I don't hear from them in a month, I will call them once. Okay. Because it breaks the resistance on their part. Because as the time went by, they got more resistant to making me the call because they were embarrassed. Now, even there, though, most of them don't then follow up because they're not desperate enough. You heard it throughout the call today. The whole point of step 1 is to raise the temperature so that they're desperate enough. Because they've got to come and get it. I'm not going to chase them. And in fact, the man said, I will work as hard as you do, Herb. I won't work any harder, and I will never chase you. Yeah. But these are the things we learn. These are the things, because everybody wants to help. Everybody knows they can help. And some of us who want to help you more than you want the help will chase you. And of course, that's where Al-Anon comes in wonderfully, doesn't it?
Right. And also I've got to trust a power greater than myself to work out the details. If I don't have time and someone needs more time, they'll find the gift of desperation and find someone else if they need.
That's right. Well, and that's the image that we'll end on this, because it's a perfect closure to what we're doing here. And that is the Buddhists talk about the master who points the way to the light. All right. Many people worship the finger, but the master's really better off in the humility that I'm the finger pointing the way. You want to find the light. You want to find the power. That's the whole point. I'm going to help you find the power. I'm going to help you dispel the darkness and get into the light. Yeah? Yeah, it's a great image for us. We're lanterns. We're not the light. Just a lantern shining the light on the path that we walk in order to have a bright light, all right, so that others can walk the path in the light of our experience and have their own experience, please, because it's available to you and it's yours. It's a fingerprint and it's as unique as your own DNA, as is your invitation to help. Oh, you can tell I can go on forever. So we're going to bring it to closure now with the Serenity Prayer. Thank you so much. Wonderful, stimulating call. Hopefully it was helpful to everybody. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference.